Press.
Good afternoon. At this time, we'd like to call to order the Rail Committee meeting for the City Council of Palo Alto for Tuesday, November 18th, 2025. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Lithcott-Hames.
Here.
Chair Burt.
Here.
Mayor Lowing.
Here, I'm attending remotely under AB 2449 in emergency circumstances.
And your voice is coming across not very strong. I don't know if you have ability.
Is this better? Is it closer now? I've got the volume.
Really.
Okay.
That's a little better, maybe. Okay, we'll give it a shot.
And for the record, we have quorum.
Great. All right. Well, we have a very full agenda today. Our first order is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on items that are not on the agenda but are otherwise in the purview of this committee. Do we have any speakers?
To the chair, at this moment for general public comment, I have not received any speaker cards.
Okay, great. So we'll move right into updates from our interagency activities. Our first is from Caltrain. Navi, you handling this?
I am. Thank you so much. Thank you. I just wanted to start off and take a moment to thank staff, members of this committee, and members of the public for the opportunity to speak to the upcoming safety enhancements. I'm going to begin by talking about some of the safety enhancements we'll be doing in Churchill, Palo Alto, Charleston, and East Meadow. Caltrain has been partnering with the city over the last couple of months to advance near-term safety enhancements here in Palo Alto as well as across the corridor. And so as discussed previously, the safety enhancements at Churchill, Palo Alto, Charleston, and East Meadow were approved to be included into the Caltrain capital budget at the November Caltrain board meeting. And once a notice to proceed to our contract operator, Tazi, is issued, construction is expected to take approximately 3 to 5 weeks. And other considerations that we are working on are the CPUC GO 88B approval. So we're hoping to still aim for the January or early 2026 timeframe, but a lot of that is contingent upon any sort of schedule impact that may come up for CPUC's GO 88 application approvals, as well as any sort of NTP proceeding. But we are really focused on getting this work and the safety enhancements implemented as soon as possible, because we do see value and we've seen how much of an impact these improvements can have on communities, as discussed previously. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about the baseline at-grade crossing improvements that folks can anticipate to see. So we are reviewing and finalizing the scope with city staff now, have shared the GOA 88 packages, reviewed and incorporated city staff feedback, and submitted the GO 88 application package for CPUC review. We expect those approvals in the coming weeks, which would allow construction to begin shortly afterwards. The installation itself is a short duration effort for the solar markers, delineators, and the striping refresh. That's about 3 to 5 weeks. And the time, as I had mentioned, that timeline remains subject to any adjustment as each milestone is confirmed. So what I'm hoping to do is come back to the committee as you all continue to meet to provide an update on this effort. For Palo Alto and Alma, we have a coordinated and staged delivery approach. So for the improvements at Palo Alto, Caltrain is coordinating closely with city staff to deliver the work in stages in order to not have overlapping or competing scopes of work. So the city's Quiet Zone project will lead the striping work after the median installation is complete. And once the city completes the striping component, Caltrain will follow with installation of the solar markers and delineators to complete the corridor crossing strategy baseline safety enhancement package. In closing, we appreciate the city's continued collaboration and communication as these safety efforts move forward. Caltrain remains committed to working closely with the city to enhance these safety improvements and really support community awareness about what's being incorporated and applied, and keep stakeholders informed as the work progresses. I also understand that today's agenda is quite full and this is a meaty subject. So what I also wanted to offer is we've got a program director on our staff who's specifically overseeing this work. And so as soon as, appropriate, we'd love to come as an official agenda item if the committee would like to see this as an official agenda item and talk about this with a progress update. So we'll continue to work with city staff on that, and obviously City Manager Shikata. That's it for me.
Thanks. And just to clarify for people what the GO88 is, that's the California Public Utilities Commission has the authority and obligation to approve any changes to rail crossings in the state. And so that's the process that we go through for that.
Yes, that's correct.
Julie?
Thank you, Chair. I know time is short, and yet I also know that this is such it's an issue our community really has eyes on and has been urging council to be very aggressive about near-term safety improvements. And so while, many of us in this room know what you're talking about when you refer to what's coming at the other three, if you could, in a short time, just sort of the high level, broad description of what is coming to Churchill, Meadow, and Charleston in this scope.
And Palo Alto Avenue.
And Palo Alto Avenue. Well, you already explained a little bit more detail about Palo Alto Avenue, but yes, all of it. But just an overview, please.
Okay, I may have to look at Ripon to help assist, but what we have is solar markers, the delineators, we have pavement markings and striping, so that refresh, so that's that within the dynamic envelope, having that striping very clear, solar powered markers, and then we're also working on, I believe we've met with the city to talk about traffic signal timing updates as needed. So those are things that I think we're going to continue to have conversations about, looking kind of not even just within what Caltrain's at-grade crossing is, but the timing for the actual traffic signal. And then some of the other improvements include rail sentry at Churchill, at Meadow and Charleston. And as a reminder, we did a package of improvements at Churchill previously. And so we had piloted the Rail Sentry AI LiDAR technology a few months ago now, and also incorporated some of these broader package of improvements at that crossing specifically.
And then so the Rail Sentry, just so everybody understands, is a combination of video cameras and LiDAR that are powered by artificial intelligence to be able to notify through dispatch centers for the trains to stop if we have either a vehicle or a pedestrian who is on the right-of-way as a train is approaching or is exhibiting unusual behavior, and that's what the AI is doing. And even more immediately, if a pedestrian goes outside of the right-of-way. And then the last component is these anti-intrusion mats. And those are the 10-foot wide across the corridor, 6-inch tall rubber cones that make it almost impossible to walk across. And that's the final component, which we don't yet have at Churchill, but Churchill is going to be the initial pilot of the system in the coming weeks. And then we'll have that same technology at Charleston and Meadow.
So correct. So we are going to be piloting at Churchill these anti-trespass panels. What we want to do is, this is newer to the Caltrain corridor. It's something that we are under a kind of traditional hazard risk assessment, want to make sure that these panels are meeting the needs of and not constraining any sort of operational safety restrictions that we have at the agency. And so we are really looking forward to pilot this. And as Councilmember Burr mentioned, we're hoping to ensure, once we've done and conducted this pilot here, how does it work at other crossings, not only in Palo Alto, but across the corridor?
So when we say that the Rail Sentry and anti-intrusion mats, I know that Rail Sentry is already at Churchill. Anti-intrusion is going into Churchill?
Yes, it will be piloted.
It'll be piloted. So we are not yet at a thumbs up for anti-intrusion mats at Meadow and Charleston?
We are, I believe we are, I may have to follow up with you on that one. We are looking to pilot it at Churchill specifically.
Yeah, my understanding is it would pilot at Churchill, and that actually they're being airshipped from Europe for Churchill. And then the intention is that they will go in at Meadow and Charleston. They just have to have a first pilot, confirm everything operates as intended, and then they'd go at Meadow and Charleston.
And what's your sense of the time frame on that?
I haven't heard the latest, but my understanding was that the Churchill would be within coming weeks. And do we need the CPUC approval to install those mats as well?
I would assume yes. Any modification to that grade crossing needs to go through GA.
Yeah. And, oh, sorry.
Yeah, and just that we need to understand and try to accelerate that time frame.
Yeah, and part of what we want to do is to Councilmember Burt's, I always want to say Director Burt, but to Councilmember Burt's point, part of what we want to do is get the anti-trespass panel order in like as concurrently with the safety improvements that we're going to be doing. And so we owe the city an update on what that will look like and when we plan to have that installation occur. And that'll be a part of an update that we follow up with as soon as we hear back on that order itself.
Hey, Ripon, did you want to? Oh, sorry.
We did have a request this public comment on item A.
We'll take them at the
After-
end of A, B, and
Yep.
C. Okay, Ripon?
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Ripon Bhatia, Senior Engineer with the Office of Transportation for Record. If you can pull up the slides for the presentation on the status report for staff, please. So I'd like to say in interest of the time, and we have two large items for discussion today, and so I'll be brief and quick on my update.
You can just stop.
So I can start. So he's pulling up the presentation. Next slide, please. So for first update, staff has been working on several projects, and one of the major projects that we are coordinating with VTA and Caltrain is about the Palo Alto Mobility Hub planning efforts. Last week, Urban Land Institute conducted a one-week charrette and developed a list of ideas in moving forward with station planning. The Urban Land Institute will present those findings as recommendations to the city to explore and advance further in developing and implementing through capital improvement projects. Next slide, please. Bike and pet transportation plan update from 2012 is in progress. Draft bicycle and pedestrian plan has been in circulation and had received comments from community starting October 3rd to November 14th. Also, it went through PTC review, Planning and Transportation Commission review, and they have unanimously recommended to move forward with for adoption. So the draft plan will be brought back to the City Council in a study session on December 1st for review and discussion. Following that direction, we'll look at adoption in early next year. Next slide, please. For Elma Charleston road safety improvements, Navi did mention about some of the near term. So I would call these as midterm improvements because we are looking at some additional improvements at Elma and Charleston, which includes traffic signal modification, pre-signal, and signing and striping through the crossing. The staff is collaborating with Caltrain and Caltran. It's a fully grant-funded project that will look at the safety and improving intersection. Staff conducted a community meeting on October 28th and received comments from the community on this project, and we'll bring forward this project for committee's review early next year before bringing it to the council for their review and recommendation. Next slide, please. Finally, on quiet zone, the construction of improvements that are required for quiet zone installation at Palo Alto is in progress. We are hoping to get these construction completed by the end of this year, early next year, following the construction of the improvements, we would have to coordinate with CPUC and FRA for their final inspection before issuing the notice of establishment. And so we'll keep our committee
That's just at Palo Alto Avenue.
at Palo Alto Avenue. For Churchill Meadow and Charleston, we made a major milestone last week. On Monday, the council approved 4 quadrant gate systems as a measure to implement quiet zone through Palo Alto at these crossings. And so we will be working with Caltrain on the next steps in finding the design and construction methods for implementing quiet zone at this location. So we are already starting it, and also we'll look at creating a capital improvement project for funding these improvements. And I think that concludes my staff update. Thanks.
Thank you. And I did want to add one other thing on the VTA, which is that the funding, as Navi said, that the Caltrain board approved the funding for the safety improvements at Charleston and Meadow. But the funding for that actually came from VTA, and the Measure B that the county voters supported in 2016. And it's a portion of those funds are called the Caltrain Modernization Program. And our CEO at VTA provided that funding on an urgent basis, and our CEO at Caltrain has been a great supporter and driving force for the urgency of these measures too. So I just want to call them out.
Could I ask,
Yep.
what portion, if any, of the costs for the quiet zone implementation is going to be coming from, well, not if
I
any.
wasn't talking about quiet zone. I was talking about the safety measures.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Quiet zone, it remains to be determined, but that same bucket of dollars may be a funding source for the quiet zones. That, as of right now, there was, in 2016 dollars, there were 300 million or so toward the category of Caltrain modernization, separate from what was then 740 million toward grade separations between Sunnyvale and Palo Alto. Separate 300 million or so toward Caltrain modernization within Santa Clara County. There have been only limited allocations out of that since 2017, 2018. We have an ad hoc committee that I'm going to be serving on. We meet early next month. And the safety improvements throughout the corridor are already one of the proposed uses. Quiet zones have not been discussed yet, but it is a possibility that they would be a funding source. But that certainly has not been determined yet.
Reason I'm asking is after council's major milestone, as you put it, to move forward with the 4 quad gate system for quiet zones, we did receive a number of emails from members of the public urging us to fold, expenses related to that project into our mid-year budget review. And I just want to get a sense as to, is that timeliness appropriate given the project's ultimate beginning and duration, or is that a bit premature?
Yeah, we are looking at mid-year appropriations to see if we could add some additional funding for this project. And we could have a kickstart with a design efforts, which will be a period of time within which we can have our projects going. So we'll be looking at those avenues as to make sure that we don't stall the project and keep moving the project forward.
I should make one other note just so everybody understands it. On the quiet zones, horn blasting is done as a safety measure. Caltrain as an entity is very concerned about safety on the corridor, and they have had all for decades apprehensions about quiet zones, but when cities have wanted to go forward, they've been willing to do so. The the physical measures that are done for quiet zones are the quad gates and the separations on the median separations on the approaching lanes, and some other requirements are federal requirements to establish a quiet zone. A number of those measures are not particularly appropriate from a practical standpoint for our grade crossings. They add some value. But what we're doing on the enhanced crossing strategy of all the measures that Navi mentioned are actually, from a practical standpoint, probably more valuable on safety and security than the measures we do for quiet zones. But they will benefit when we implement a quiet zone. We will have these additional safety measures beyond the quad gates. And in some ways, it addresses the concerns that Caltrain has over their apprehension about quiet zones. I haven't successfully convinced them that yet that that's a real substantive difference, but in my mind, it is.
I'm pretty sure you will.
We'll keep working on it. Okay, and we have one or more members of the public? Okay.
Yeah.
And for those who weren't here when we started, we have a really tight schedule today, so we'll go 2 minutes for each member of the public.
All right. Our first speaker is Adrian B. Adrian B., you may now speak.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Adrian Brandt. For identification purposes, I'm the chair of the Caltrain Citizens Advisory Committee, speaking as an individual today. I wanted to make some comments relating to the safety update from Caltrain. Currently, I'm seeing many crossings are still doing what's called double pumping or ghost activations. I have not been to Palo Alto to monitor that carefully, but I would encourage city staff or someone maybe on the rail committee to pay attention to particularly the Alma crossing, or I'm sorry, Palo Alto Avenue crossing. That crossing is downstream of your station at University Avenue, and the grade crossing optimization system appears not to be working the way staff has been telling the board and the public that it would be. I'm seeing many crossings are still double pumping. This is a safety concern because motorists learn that the gates come down, they go back up, and they think they might be able to drive around, or pedestrians or bikes may do the same. So I really want to make sure that we let Caltrain know. So if you guys could check that, and they need to respond to that. I also want to comment on the Rail Sentry. As the recently departed Chief Safety Officer, Mike Meter, explained it. The way it works really is the AI triggers the rules for notifying a monitoring center, I believe in Texas, and the human has to look at the screen and decide to see if it's a valid alert, and then call the Caltrain dispatch, who then can notify the trains to slow down or stop as appropriate. It is a purely reactive system. It does nothing to prevent people from driving or walking onto the tracks per se, but it does provide warnings. However, the soft hit poles, or the delineators, are extremely effective according to Mike, and so I really would encourage continuing to pursue those as soon as possible. Thank you.
Next speaker is Roland. Roland, you may now speak.
Thank you, Chair, committee members. Good afternoon, Roland Lebrun from South San Jose. With all due respect, what I would like to do is to set a record straight on the various Caltrain parts on Measure B. As Chair correctly pointed out, the $700 million is for grade separations in Palo Alto, Sunnyvale, and Mountain View. But the $300 million has got nothing whatsoever to do with Caltrain modernization. Caltrain modernization is funded through VTA's 2000 Measure A funding, not Measure B. So I'm on the new VTA transparency website, which is the URL is 2016 measureb.vta.org. And I've clicked on the There are two boxes, the Caltrain corridor capacity and Caltrain grade crossings. And I'm reading you the ballot language. And it says the program will fund Caltrain corridor capacity improvements, including increased service to Morgan Hill and Gilroy, station improvements, level boarding, extended platforms, and service enhancements. So in closing, respectfully, I believe that the funding for all the good work that we're doing with grade crossings and improvement up and down the peninsula should be coming from the grade crossing part, which is much larger, rather than the much smaller part for Caltrain corridor capacity, and especially between San Jose and Gilroy, which right now traffic has reached a critical point. I don't understand how we're going to survive without Caltrain service down there. Thank you.
And to the chair, that concludes public comment for this item.
Great, thanks. And just for the record, there are two funds from the Measure B, and the Caltrain modernization is the second one, as I stated previously. Okay, now let's move on to our action items. The first one is the South Palo Alto bike pedestrian connectivity. And Sylvia, are you going to kick this off? Okay, Charlie.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll just get the presentation pulled up. But in the meantime, good afternoon, everyone. Charlie Cole, Senior Transportation Planner with the Office of Transportation, here to speak with you all about the South Palo Alto Bike Ped Connectivity Project. I'm joined here by Ria Hadabarat-Lowe, our Chief Transportation Official, Sylvia Starlack, our Transportation Planning Manager. We also have Amanda Leahy from Kittleson and Associates on the line, as well as Jagi Bandal from BKF Engineers on the call. So they're part of the consultant team that's helping to support the city on this project. And so the purpose of this project is to identify locations and develop conceptual designs for additional grade separated bicycle and pedestrian rail crossings in the southern portion of the city. Our scope of work with Kittleson and Associates and their subconsultants, as approved by Council on September 9th, 2024, it involves a step-by-step process that starts with a comprehensive look of the whole corridor in South Palo Alto to identify where there may be opportunities for bicycle and pedestrian grade separated crossings. Through this process, we identified over 25 potential design alternatives that aligned with the project goals and design priorities, and prepared an initial screening assessment. This initial screening assessment resulted in 8 conceptual design alternatives, which were then advanced through an initial assessment through the alternatives analysis, which is the focus of the meeting today. And the goal is for council to select 2 conceptual design alternatives for further analysis and development, which we expect that decision to occur in early 2026. I would also just like to make clear that, as you all know, but more for the members of the public, this effort is separate from the rail grade separation effort that's planned at Churchill, Meadow, and Charleston. This connectivity effort is focusing on additional bicycle and pedestrian only crossings. Next slide, please. So this slide, when it comes up, will just provide an overview of the item for this afternoon. Our staff report provides an overview of the project and work completed to date. It also presents the 8 potential conceptual design alternatives and the alternatives analysis. We've put forward 2 deliberation options for possible rail committee recommendations to council that are described in your staff report and summarized on the slide. I'll just quickly go through these. Option 1 is to review and provide initial feedback on all 8 alternatives, and then staff would return to rail committee in early 2026 for further input and a recommendation to council to on up to 2 alternatives to advance to 15% design. Option 2 would be to essentially do the same, but it goes a step further in including a recommendation to council this afternoon on alternatives to be eliminated from further consideration. Staff have included a recommendation to consider the elimination of alternatives D, E, and F due to lower bicycle and pedestrian ridership forecasts at these locations, proximity to existing crossings at Meadow and Charleston, more difficult wayfinding in adjacent neighborhoods, and then technical construction challenges due to the overlapping construction areas with the rail grade separation projects at Meadow and Charleston. And so this elimination of alternatives would allow the project team and the community to focus their attention on the remaining alternatives. It would also give some clarity and relief to potential affected property owners. Staff would return to Rail Committee in early 2026 for further input and a recommendation to council, request a recommendation to council on up to 2 alternatives to advance to 15% design. So a couple options there for your consideration. Next slide, please. This slide really just shows the project study area, which again, we're focusing on the southern portion of the city, which we've defined as south of Oregon Expressway and crossing the Caltrain Rail Corridor south of Oregon Expressway. Next slide, please. I'll spend a bit of time just on the project background slide here to help provide kind of a framework for why we're here. So there have been several council-supported plans and studies that have really just identified the need of additional grade-separated bicycle and pedestrian crossings, particularly in the southern portion of the city. So this comes up in our comprehensive plan. It's shown in the 2012 Bicycle and Pedestrian Transportation Plan. This is our current BPTP. And even further, in the 2012 BPTP, it recognizes the need for cross-barrier connections at the Matadero Creek location. So this is a specific location along the corridor. This crossing was proposed to connect to Midtown through a future Matadero Creek trail. And this was taken a step further through the 2016 Midtown Connector Feasibility Study that you see on your screen, which evaluated the Midtown connection along Matadero Creek. And it also showed 3 conceptual alignments for a rail crossing in the Matadero Creek vicinity. Specifically, there was one at Matadero Creek, there was a second at El Carmelo Avenue, and there was a third at Loma Verde Avenue. And so when you look at those, just to go off on a tangent here for a second, when you look at the kind of the specifics of those conceptual alignments, all of those alignments included options that use portions of a city-owned Park Boulevard substation. Through the project that we're currently working on, this project, we met with the Utilities Department to review those alignments and discuss feasibility. And really key takeaways from those discussions were to ultimately avoid using the substation right-of-way, considering that this is a critical facility for the city. It would be difficult to move or consolidate equipment, and there was a need to preserve space for maintenance and future growth. So I expected that question to come up, so I just wanted to lay that out there up front. And then there's also the Palo Alto Rail Corridor Study that was from 2013. And in that study, it identified possible crossing locations at Matadero Creek, Adobe Creek, and Fern Avenue in our study area. And so many others, all of which kind of shown on your screen are summarized here. In addition to the citywide plans, there's also the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority, the VTA, and their adopted countywide bike plan, which identified the Caltrain tracks in southern Palo Alto as a key barrier to bicycle movement in the county. So all of that really puts it together that this project is really implementing the recommendations of previous council-supported plans and studies to just work to address those mobility gaps and barriers to walking and biking. I'll also just add that in the formation of this scope of work in this project, there was some other council direction that we received from many years ago at this point, but it helped to inform the scope of work. There was a meeting on January 22nd, 2019, where council directed staff to separately study the bicycle and pedestrian crossing of the Caltrain corridor in the vicinity of Loma Verde Avenue. So that's in the Matadero Creek area. And then a couple of years later, on November 29th, 2021, council directed staff to ensure that the BPTP includes an evaluation of the South Palo Alto bike pedestrian crossing in the vicinity of Adobe Creek, consistent with the 2013 rail plan. So we sort of have those different segments along this whole corridor. So all of that was information that we took into consideration as we're kind of led to where we're at today. I'll also just emphasize that, as you all know, there's a lot going on at this part of the city. There's our BPTP update. There's a housing element update and all the future housing that will be built along San Antonio Road and El Camino in southern Palo Alto. There's a San Antonio Road area plan, which is a land use and transportation plan that's reimagining the San Antonio Road area. There's the Cubberley Community Center project. There's the rail grade separation projects. And that's really just a long-winded way of saying there's a lot happening. But I think it's important to understand that all these things go together. And so this crossings project, this bicycle and pedestrian crossings project, will help to support all of these other projects in the future and in the broader context of the city's mobility and sustainability goals. Next slide, please. So here's our project timeline. We're now in phase 2, where we're gathering feedback on the 8 preliminary concept designs, design alternatives, and we're expected to complete phase 2 through early 2026 with the goal of council selecting 2 alternatives for further analysis and development that would then be carried into phase 3 and packaging everything together into a public draft report. And then the goal for phase 4 is to obtain council approval of the final report and through this process be applying for grant funding for next phases of work. Next slide, please. So before we get into the different designs, I just want to emphasize that transportation projects of this magnitude are very complex. And so we are at the very early stages of a high-profile project that involves many stakeholders and agencies such as Caltrain, the City of Mountain View, County of Santa Clara, Valley Water, and they all have their own design standards and priorities. And so each of the 8 alternatives were developed in accordance with these design standards, but there are still many challenges that we'll need to overcome as we look to advance these alternatives. Designs are feasible, but they're also all still very much fluid and subject to refinement. So consider these to be still very flexible and high level in nature at this point. Also just wanted to emphasize here, as shown on your screen, that all alternatives have right-of-way implications that will need to be worked out once this list is narrowed down. We've known from the very beginning of this project that this would be a major challenge just due to the physical nature of land use on either side of the railroad tracks. And so to address this challenge as a public agency, we want this to be a public process. We want to be transparent about the trade-offs and challenges associated with each of these alternatives. So that being said, there's much more community engagement and technical design work that will be needed once locations and basic design concepts have been selected to move forward. Next slide, please. So shown on your screen are the locations of each crossing alternative. We've overlaid that with the city's suggested walking and cycling routes for context, and those are the light green lines. And then location of public school locations as well. Those are the purple circles just for context. Next slide, please. Shown on your screen are the 8 preliminary concept designs. As a reminder, these designs are still very high level, very much flexible and modular in nature. So in a sense, they can be moved up and down along the corridor where space allows. I also wanted to point out that these drawings are to scale, and they probably provide more detail than what's needed at this point. However, we wanted to make sure we included this level of detail to make sure that the community had a sense of what these could look like, how they might function, and how much space we would need to ultimately construct them. You'll notice some locations have multiple concepts under consideration. This is due to crossing location priorities described in previous council-supported plans, as well as feedback gathered during the first phase of engagement. You also notice that many of these alternatives have a wavy path, and at least in one part of the designs. And this is to accommodate a ramp and the ramp length that would be needed to provide an accessible path between the tunnel and the street level. Finally, you notice there are many consistencies between designs where we've proposed a new tunnel. The ramp widths, ramp grades, tunnel heights, and widths are all consistent amongst alternatives. And we intended this to just to help the conversation be a bit simpler at this point. As you're reviewing the conceptual designs, I would recommend focusing your feedback on the bigger design concepts here, which is really location and what do we do at Alma Street? Do we build some kind of a new signal for an at-grade crossing, or are we looking to do a full grade-separated tunnel underneath Alma Street as well? So hopefully that just helps to focus your attention. And happy to walk through each of these alternatives a bit more if that's helpful. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the results of the alternatives analysis, which evaluated each of those alternatives, the design alternatives, using the evaluation criteria that was created for this project. So when you're looking at this table here, higher scores are shown in kind of the black or darker gray, indicate stronger alignment with community values, whereas the lower scores are the lighter gray coloring. Just to note, results are just one of several considerations in the process of selecting alternatives, but we felt that this information, at a minimum, would be helpful in the decision-making process. Next slide, please. Shown on your screen is an overview of the tools and activities that we're using through phase 2 of community engagement, where we're gathering input and feedback on the 8 concept design alternatives under consideration. I have included a number of additional slides in the staff presentation that was provided to you at the tail end of the presentation slide deck that provides some additional information on feedback that we're hearing through the different events and different such as the online survey. We have results from the online survey that's presented at the back of the slide deck as well, if you're interested in a bit more information. And then I have a slide here, just in a couple of slides that kind of synthesizes all of that, all of what we've been hearing so far, and just a couple of slides that I'll be happy to just go through here to provide you a snapshot of what we've heard so far. Also, on the kind of the last bullet point on this slide, notes that we've have planned to go to 10 presentations to standing committees. This is focused on going to our Pedestrian Bicycle Advisory Committee, City School Transportation Safety Committee, Planning and Transportation Commission, Rail Committee, and then City Council. We're about halfway through those presentations now, as we're kind of wrapping up this first round of engagement where we're presenting and getting initial feedback. Next slide, please. And so just quickly, this kind of summarizes those the next meetings that we have scheduled. Our initial review of 8 alternatives. We expect to go to City Council on December 1st. And then in early 2026, we have our meeting schedule to go through each of the committees once again, and hopefully get a recommendation to then present to council in March of 2026. Next slide, please. So as I alluded to, here's kind of the synthesis of all of the phase 2 stakeholder input that we've received from the standing committee meetings, from online survey, from all the different methods that we're gathering input through phase 2. And so just to summarize, I know there's a lot of text here, but I think it's helpful in this particular point in time to understand some of what we're hearing. Most have supported alternatives B, A, and H, and there's interest in alternative G, recognizing and just considering different factors such as attempting to minimize impacts to residential properties, trying to provide the most direct routes and connections in neighboring routes to and from future crossings, a desire for a grade-separated Alma Street, connections to existing bicycle facilities, and then higher bicycle pedestrian demand projections that we included in our alternatives analysis. Some specific feedback for each alternative is also, each of those 4 alternatives is shown on your screen. Alternative A is favored due to limited property impacts. We did receive We have received feedback that alternative A would be even more favorable if it tunneled under Alma Street. So you have the full grade separated crossing to El Dorado Avenue. Alternative B is favored for its grade separated Alma Street crossing and the location, but recognizing that there are substantial trade-offs, notably property acquisitions that would be needed along Park Boulevard, and then the circulation impacts along Loma Verde Avenue. Alternative G, the interest in alternative G is really tied to the proximity and the station access near the San Antonio Caltrain station and Mountain View, and the support it would provide for future housing along San Antonio Road, noting that trade-offs would be additional coordination would be needed with Mountain View to get them on board with designs there. And similarly, alternative H, the interest with alternative H is the station access and future housing along San Antonio Road, trade-offs being Mountain View concurrence. And there have been concerns about the grade and comfort of a center running bikeway that we proposed over San Antonio Road using the existing bridge structure there. We have received some feedback on potential improvements on ways rather than providing the two-way separated bikeways on San Antonio Road, actually looking for other routes to get to and from the existing tunnel at the San Antonio Caltrain station. And so we have some ideas of ways to modify alternative H even further. Next slide, please. So consistent with staff's recommendation to eliminate alternatives or develop a recommendation to council to eliminate alternatives, alternatives D, E, and F. There's really less support for those alternatives due to lower bicycle and pedestrian demand forecasts, a lack of direct bicycle and pedestrian connections in adjacent neighborhoods, and complexities resulting from the overlapping construction areas with the rail grade separation project. We've also been getting a lot of various feedback on specific design elements, on ways to modify and advance these designs further. They're listed on your screen, and we hope to kind of continue to bring these ideas forward as we select designs and then modify them through additional work on this project. And my last slide is the same slide that was presented earlier. Just as a quick recap, generally this completes staff presentation. Looking forward to discussion and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that informative report. One thing before we get into discussion, I just wanted to put on the table is the relationship potentially between these alternatives and our next item in the grade separations. The council had previously discussed several times, not only the one area of Palo Alto that's the longest distance without a grade crossing capability, but the prospect of sequencing this so that we would have a good pedestrian bike crossing prior to what might be a 5-year vehicular construction crossing at Charleston and or Meadow. So those two things, projects potentially relate to each other, and that this would potentially precede the other. Any colleagues' questions? Yep, Julie?
Thank you so much, Charlie and team. Thank you for walking us through the complexity and the intertwinedness over a number of years of, this concept with so many other infrastructure projects and transportation projects in the city. Just a technical question, Charlie, you said the city asked the project to steer clear of the utility site on Park. And I wasn't clear on which options, if any, are impacted by that, or if you were saying, therefore, we steered clear of that, and that's why you're not seeing any that come. Is that it? Okay. With respect to what the chair just said, the inherent interplay, both with respect to project timeline and distances between this project and what is ultimately our grade separation effort. I recall Nadia teaching me that, some of these grade sep options might be fantastic for one reason, but it doesn't improve the quality of the experience for bikes and peds. And when we get to that item and we talk about hybrid versus underpass down in the southern end of town, I know that's an area where you're still getting, below desirable grades for the bike and ped crossing, which makes me wonder. At first I was thinking we don't need a tunnel or a crossing for bike and peds near Charleston and Meadow because they're about to get, in theory, this massive treatment. And so why not solve the problems farther north, sort of within that 1.3 mile corridor? But now I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. If we were to do a tunnel in the vicinity, in the DEF vicinity, do we then free up a grade SEP option that is currently hampered by not being good enough for bikes and peds? Do we sort of solve that problem and then allow ourselves to look at grade SEP differently? You might not be the person to answer that piece, but I just think, right, this is all related. All right. In terms of parcel impacts, that's certainly the emails and calls I've been getting from all the outreach. People have been paying attention and are alarmed. And I think what's hard is when we say parcel impacts, that's a term that packs a punch, and yet it's not very specific. And so I'm wondering, that, obviously there's a huge difference between full impacts and partial impacts and a tiny portion of someone's yard versus their entire house. And I just wanted to try to drill down and get super clear on what we mean by parcel impacts of the ones that have the least impact. I want to get clear on what they are. I thought it was A, G, and H, but you had B in that slide. The sort of second best when it comes to parcel impacts, which I think are D, E, and F, and then the worst, B and C. I don't know if I've got that right, but more importantly, I'd love to know what we think we're talking about. Personally, my feeling is for bike ped crossing, I'm going to have a hard time voting for any kind of full impact in exchange for a bike ped crossing. That's kind of where I am right now, but I want to learn more and I want to understand in the grand scheme of impacts, what's the worst and worst case and what's the best case.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. Would you mind pulling up slide 45, please? We have even additional slides just to help answer questions. So the information you're looking for will be in the alternatives analysis. So in your packet, starting on page 34, that's where the alternatives analysis begins. And then if you go to attachment B of the alternatives analysis, this starts on packet page 83. This gets into the actual evaluation criteria and analysis methods that goes into each of the evaluation criteria. And so on your screen here, I've just created this slide, recognizing that we're probably going to have a question on this that just highlights when we have I can't see it on my screen, got something blocking it, but when you see a certain color gray, what does that actually mean? And so we have those definitions in attachment B of the starting on packet page 83 of the alternatives analysis. And so you'll have to remind me specifically which alternatives you had questions on, but the range of parcel impacts is from a no parcel impact, which we have none, where there's no parcel impacts, through a potential or a partial parcel impact. So this is an impact that does not impact existing buildings, because once you start to impact buildings, you're essentially impacting the entire parcel. And then that goes all the way, in this case, down to kind of the least desirable, which is a full parcel impact on 2 or more parcels. And I'll just caveat this that, again, we're attempting these drawings to be to scale, but they are still very high level. And so when we've put these drawings and overlaid them on to aerials and to maps, we've identified specific parcels, but also recognize that it may be maybe more, it may be less when we get down to actually getting into the specifics of these designs. I'll also note that there is flexibility to move the the alternatives up and down the corridor, parcel up to the left, down to the right, so to speak.
And Julie, can I share one thing? Your concern about full property acquisitions is presumably where we're assuming that we have a homeowner who's residing in their home and doesn't want to give up their home. But that's not the only possible scenario. We could have willing sellers that are either rental property owners or even a homeowner that says, no, I would take the tax incentives, et cetera. However, most, as we currently have these sketched out, I think most of them are looking at 2 properties, correct? I thought so. And wherever there are 2 properties, the chances of having 2 side by side where you'd have willing sellers, even if we have some flexibility, as Charlie said, to move it up or down the corridor a few homes, becomes far less likely. And that goes into something I'm going to want to talk about later, which is the ramp slope, which may impact whether it's 1 or 2 properties in some circumstances.
Thank you. I appreciate this chart. And I think what's interesting with the grayscale is to see the legend, on one side going vertically and then the analysis going horizontally. My eyes are having trouble discerning like which is gray number 2 versus gray number 3 as I try to translate it. But I appreciate your drawing my attention to this. Okay, so what I'm seeing is none of them have 0 parcel impact, but 3 of them do have this partial with no impact on buildings. And then we have 1, 2, 3 that are 1 parcel, full impact on 1 parcel, 2 that are full impact on 2 parcels. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, in terms of San Antonio versus farther north, when I approached this task of preparing for today, I was really clear that we have an inadequate 1.3 mile stretch. If you're a cyclist, if you're traveling on foot between Cal Ave and Meadow, you got 1.3 miles where there's no way to cross. And I thought, okay, so let's, are we primarily solving for that? Obviously, I saw a lot of options farther south, and then grew intrigued by the notion of, hey, we can actually get ahead of all of this, development, new neighborhood, really new way of thinking about San Antonio Road and its environs. And so now I'm struggling with, well, which is the more important goal? I don't know that when many of the reports you flashed up on the slide were drawn up, that anyone was thinking about a San Antonio area plan, or maybe it was a distant plan, distant dream. If we ever had to build more housing, it's going to go in San Antonio. And now here we are. And so I don't know how to deal with that trade-off, whether to favor the 1.3 mile stretch that is really barren when it comes to crossability, or whether to say San Antonio, the southern border of the city, is, so with Cubberley and the housing and all of the ways in which transit is going to change because of San Antonio, should we be prescient and get, a nice east-west crossing in down there? And if so, what are we doing to that 1.3 mile stretch? So I'm just really struggling with how to think about that. And I'm sure my colleagues have thoughts, but that's something I'm definitely wrestling with right now. And I think that's, I'm not a cyclist. Thankfully, we have a chair who's a cyclist. But I have been through, I used to bike to my job at Stanford from the Barron Park area. And so I've done the Bull Park path, which is wonderful. And there's a little bendy part there where I've seen people collide and, almost had some collisions myself. So find myself very wary of the S. Obviously appreciate the angle, the length of it ultimately makes a big difference, the slope of it. So I am looking forward to hearing, probably Pat's analysis of what, which of these is actually going to be an optimal cycling and ped experience. I truly have, just no expertise to bring to bear on that. So look forward to hearing what my colleagues have to say.
On just the question that you had on the development that we're having and how that impacts these decisions, an important consideration that I couldn't find, and I don't know whether it's in the report or we might be able to hear more about it, which is origins and destinations. And so we have the development on San Antonio corridor, but where are people going? We're concerned about families and children and others getting to schools and community centers and where they might shop and where they might work. When we move up the corridor, we have more of an issue. So the San Antonio residents are not going to have their children crossing the tracks and crossing El Camino to get to school, which is a big consideration. As we move further up the corridor, we do have those occasions. And a lot of the new school boundaries may yet be sorted out, but that becomes more of an issue. And then work factors. So in the vicinity of Loma Verde, we have had this prospect of a bike route through the NVCAP area, and then potentially an off-road route in this right-of-way that Valley Water owns that would take us all the way to the Bull Park Path to feed all of Stanford Research Park and Gunn High School and the other Barron Park areas. So in my mind, there's a big difference in where people are moving, as well as the new housing on El Camino. Like I say, the school board's yet to set boundaries, but presumably those new developments on the west side of El Camino would go to Barron Park schools. But on the east side, they may very well go to schools on the east side of El Camino, may go to schools on the east side of the tracks. So we don't know all that, but those are kind of concepts for us to be thinking about.
Well, thank you. And you're reminding me that much of San Antonio, if not all of it, or certainly one side of it, the south side of it, is zoned for Mountain View, Wisman, right? Schools. So those kids, we're not having to worry about them crossing El Camino or, okay. Okay, thanks. That's it for me for now.
Nadia?
So this is great. Thank you for your in-depth work, Charlie. My only concern about looking at all the alternatives at this point is I know Charlie mentioned that right-of-way impacts is something we're going to have to consider, but I don't know if you guys remember that we have this outstanding problem of potentially a 4-track situation for Caltrain, and that straddles the CalAV area. And I went back and looked at our presentation from November of 2023, I think it is, and I can't see on the map how far down south it goes. But you can see in alternative A that the picture shows there's a little bit of an extra piece of track, which is actually an old piece of the Union Pacific place where they park a train. So the right-of-way is wider there. But it also means that there might be right-of-way implications in all of those areas. So all the parts where you see the ramp for the bike being on the Caltrain side and not on the opposite side of Alma, it presents a possibility that as we go deeper into alternatives analysis, that might change some of our answers. And I know that Charlie gave the big caveat that all of this needs to be explored, but I just want to caution against, you might think you're going down one path and that might change some of your answers. The same can be said of even some of the alternatives as you go further south, where they're looking at having the bike path right up against between Alma and the tracks. It kind of depends where the right-of-way line is there for Caltrain and their ability to use all that space. And also it runs up against, any distances that relate to shoe fly tracks if we are doing construction further north. So I just wanted to flag that. That's all. And I looked at the schedule of the upcoming meetings that you have, and I didn't notice anything for the city school liaison committees. I don't know if those meetings have been happening, but I feel like, that we just need to be checking in with them about any other feedback that they might have, which might be different than paybacks. And so I just wanted to flag those two things.
And I don't know if Mayor Lowing has any questions or comments. Is he still online? There you are.
I have comments, but you wanted questions. So I was going to hold on. Did you hear me?
Not very well.
Oh, shoot. I was going to say I have some comments, but not questions. I thought that's what you asked for first. one of them is picking up on a specific location that maybe we want to actually reduce in addition to the 3 that are recommended by staff.
And something just happened. We heard you better at the end. So do that more.
I didn't move.
Yeah. 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 Okay. So let me make a few questions and frame a couple things. One, on the removal of D, E, and F, I wanted to follow up on Julie's reminder that when we were looking and when the council authorized exploring a second location down in the vicinity of D, E, and F, it was, if I recall correctly, it was with that possibility that you described. Would it open up the design alternatives for the vehicular crossing and potentially reduce property impacts if we move the bikes and peds off of that intersection, or in some way had a favorable impact on what we would do at Charleston and Meadow? We haven't, we'll hear more on the next item, and maybe we can ask Edgar a little more on whether any of that is possible, but that's not what has come to the forefront so far on the alternatives that we've seen on the vehicular crossings, that but we can probe that in the next item. And then on alternative H, or related to alternative H, Charlie, you alluded to kind of some other possibilities, and one that's been at the forefront of my mind is directly across from the San Antonio Caltrain station, is what today is a Google leased property. It was formerly the Mayfield Mall, I think, decades ago. And that is a property that my understanding is Mountain View is anticipating eventually redeveloping. And right now we have actually a seldom used vehicular underpass under San Antonio at, I forget the name of the street, just to the east of the San Antonio underpass that goes over to that property. And then a roadway that I believe is on private property. But with this redevelopment, could be something that creates a bike and pedestrian access to a signalized crossing, perhaps, at that station. And then there is an underpass at the San Antonio station that goes to both sides, I believe. So when I think about a bike and ped improved access in that area, that's one possibility that I'd want to explore more in collaboration with Mountain View. And then that goes to the other topic on both. Said, no, I got my letters wrong. G and H. They really, to a great degree, serve Mountain View. They would also serve Palo Alto, but they're very much also maybe as much or more serving Mountain View as Palo Alto. And so consideration of those at whatever point in time, I'm assuming would need to be a deep collaboration and partnership with Mountain View. Not that we'd be looking at putting one in Palo Alto and a Palo Alto expense, but we'd only, in my mind, do it in collaboration with Mountain View. But we're not, I don't know if there have been any discussions with Mountain View on this yet, or is that still?
Yeah, there have been discussions quite a while ago with Mountain View, but not as much recently. And there has been some changes in their CIP. So H, there was a placeholder in the old CIP 5-year plan for H, but they've also had budget issues and have removed it from the unscheduled list on that side as well.
So,
And also in response to your previous question, so for the grade separations, I don't think that we can extract the paired bike pieces from the grade separations at this stage, because that would be a major change in scope and that would affect like grants and funding sorts of funding situations.
okay. And then I wanted to note on, well, a couple things on alternatives A, B, and C, which with the elimination of D, E, and F and G and H being Mountain View related, seems like we're concentrating on one in the vicinity of Matadero. And Charlie spoke about trade-offs. We actually, A, B, and C, one or the other had going under Alma and the other had a signal at Alma. Is it correct that really we could mix and match? We could do any of those under Alma and the tracks and any of them just under the tracks? Is that correct?
I would say yes, but just with the caveat that where space allows.
Right. Okay. And A, which is called the El Dorado Tunnel, on the west side, its ramp is on a commercial property. The staff report says that it would take 40, I think, 40 or 41 of the parking spaces in that commercial parking lot. When I looked at it on Google Maps and tried to overlay and I don't know if we can pull up the image that is essentially on page 40, packet page 42, this image of A. That I counted about 20 parking spaces, not counting whether they could reconfigure the lot. They have a little parklet at the center of their lot, and whether the impact would be even less. And then lastly, on potential impacts, really not only at this location, but elsewhere, is a critical question of what is the slope of the ramp. So as the report let us know, the ideal is a 5% slope. We've selected for all these options, 7% was used for the versions that we're seeing here. ADA requirement is 8.3%. And as an example, our ramp at Cal Ave, which is too steep, is 12%. So existing older ramps were things like 12%. We wouldn't want to do that today, but 7 is not a magical number. It's a good number. There are people who would like to see 5, but if we have trade-offs, for instance, when we're looking at some of these serpentine ramps on the west side, I'm very interested in whether the same amount of property would be impacted if we went to 8.3%. And would we cut in half the number of parking spaces lost in this commercial area if it was 8.3? On B and C, would we potentially go from, I think those are 2 properties on each of them, right? Would we potentially go to 1? I doubt that, because it's much more serpentine than A. So it goes back to this issue of, if on B and C, there's no way to get around 2 properties being impacted, it makes it highly unlikely that we'd be able to have a west side ramp with 2 willing sellers that we could find. And that really moves me to a much stronger inclination toward A. I did want to note that just on the shading, the narrative on A said it's the lowest anticipated cost, but the shades had the construction cost as pretty high. Similarly, it because this version of goes only under the tracks, not under Alma. It has operation and maintenance costs pretty high, but the narrative says it's the shortest of the tunnel operations. So I was assuming that would correlate to low operation and maintenance. So those are a couple just tweaks in where the shading didn't seem to correspond to the narrative. As Charlie noted, we have these are preliminary conceptual, and they're not, they haven't gone forward to the even a 5% engineering is what engineering would we say is just conceptual. So just like we're going through on the vehicular ones, as we go forward with engineering, a lot of these problems may be able to be resolved through design improvements. But one of those, I think, as we go forward, the option of do we go under Alma or not is a big question. What slope we go with, or what are the options? So we look at trade-offs on slope rather than just picking one is another big question. But I'm very inclined to prioritize it was already the vicinity of Matadero had been historically, or going back actually 20 years, designated as that priority in the community to find a solution in that vicinity. That was before we had a couple changes that I think are going to even make it more valuable. When we look at the number of projected users, average the daily trips, this one ranks pretty high. It's 2,600 trips per day, 800 walking, 1,800 biking. But my understanding is that those numbers, and correct me if this is not accurate, those numbers are based upon basically location shift. The people who are already crossing the tracks would choose this location over Cal Ave or over at grade at Meadow, but it doesn't really talk about inducing mode shift, which is one of our climate action plan and sustainability priorities, one that we're going to have great challenges meeting. Opening up all of that area of South Palo Alto for workers in the Stanford Research Park, not to mention all the students and everybody else who would use it, and connecting all of the new housing on El Camino at this location, I suspect would increase the number of daily users significantly. And it has another benefit. And this is somewhat true on all of these, but I think particularly on the one in the vicinity of Matadero, is that all those mode shifts decrease the number of cars that need to take Meadow or Charleston. And as we get to the next item and look at the extreme challenges we're going to have at funding both Meadow and Charleston, but at the same time, less pressure from increased traffic and increased number of trains than we had assumed 5 years ago. That I don't know how significant that mode shift would be, but I think it's real and something we want to try to quantify. So that went into actually comments, Mayor allowing. So, but I wanted to kind of share where I'm leaning. Ed, do you want to wade in?
Yeah.
We can't hear you.
Well,
You don't have a hand over your mic or anything like that, huh?
Is anything moving around? Is it working better?
That's better. Talk like that.
All right, I'll start screaming.
Okay.
Given the staff suggestion that perhaps we want to reduce from 8 and that they have 3 recommendations to drop. I think that makes some sense. And I'm wondering if on the drop list, we should be more specific and drop B. You alluded to that there, but your comments, but there's, even Charlie said, there are some substantial problems with this or something like that. And the big one, of course, is it's automatically taking 2 eminent domain situations, but significant construction, it's a very long tunnel, significant construction, stage construction, big impact on existing utilities, and 24 months to get it done, and higher construction costs. Given that we have A, I'm wondering if we should look at taking off B.
Well, I concur with those concerns on B, but I think they apply as much or more on C. And C has not only the problems you described, but it takes us to Loma Verde. And we had looked back now 10 years, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, at whether to have a enhance Loma Verde as a major bike route east-west. And it would place the bikes on a street with a gazillion curb cuts. And one of the things I really favor about, because all those driveways, and we opted to not go forward because they were looking at having to remove parking on an additional side of the street, if I recall, but you'd still have all these cars coming out of driveways. And what's very appealing to me about A, and actually I think it would apply to B if B didn't have other problems. No, that's Loma Verde. Then A is by taking us to El Dorado, we would have the opportunity to make El Dorado maybe a partial restriction and more of a bike boulevard, and separate the where cars tend to travel from where bikes tend to travel. And especially that El Dorado takes us into an elementary school. I'm particularly favorable about having a street that is very low vehicular travel for school-age kids. So I would agree with you on that B's problematic, but I think C is perhaps even more problematic. Sylvia?
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify, El Dorado is not El Carmelo.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure because you said that it was taking kids to an elementary school.
Yeah, but El Dorado, if I recall, also has that capability. I'll double check on the map, but my
They're on
recollection.
opposite sides of the creek. Hiking, you can get over.
Yeah, it takes you, El Dorado takes you right out to Hoover, and then you turn right. Yeah. And I was curious on whether A has the potential to take us to El Carmelo, or it didn't look like it, but I just had that as a question. Would there be a variation that would potentially on the east side connect to El Carmelo, or would it just need to be El Dorado?
I think we can, if I'm understanding what you're asking, what you're suggesting is where the crossing is for alternative A, that's staying the same, but instead of connecting to El Dorado, having some kind of a connection to El Carmelo. And I think that could be, there could be some designs we explore to that goal. One might be to use the kind of the landscaped area between the Caltrain tracks and Alma Street, and seeing if there's an opportunity to provide some kind of a facility that ultimately connects to El Carmelo. The challenge is, how do you get across Alma Street?
And I don't have a heartburn on El Dorado being one block from it's El Carmelo Elementary. And then from El Dorado, I don't think we noted, but we have a bike path through Hoover Park that actually goes to Middlefield. People It's from the back of Hoover Park to Middlefield is a narrow path, but it is a public path that's underappreciated. It's not the width we try to have it today, and there's not a great deal of opportunity to expand its width, but it does exist. But either way, I think El Dorado potentially would be a great improvement over what we have on the east-west route there, and make a good connection to Hoover School, and then for that matter on Bryant, from El Dorado on Bryant going southbound too. Okay, so I don't know, Mayor Lowing, did you have a chance to look at this C and the points I was making, and whether we would want to treat B and C similarly as being low considerations?
No. I agree with that. It also takes properties.
Shout.
I agree with that.
Got it.
And
Thanks.
it also takes two properties.
Yeah, right. Right. The C takes two properties on the west side. Yeah.
Chair, I did want to remind you to take public comment.
Oh, yeah. Great. Thank you. Let's pause and do that.
Yeah, our first request to speak is Melinda M. Yeah. Two. There's only two requests to speak. Do you want to press the mic? Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Council, for working on this. As a biker myself, I like the El Dorado because my going to Stanford and going to Pali, you can take that route, get onto Park, and then continue down. So we, all the talk about Seal Avenue, this could actually make things better. I wonder if there's any plans for improving the California Avenue underpass, which I went through for many, many years, and it's still quite dangerous. And I also wonder what's Stanford's involvement in this, because I think they have a huge stake in this, because there's so many people that live in the Midtown area that work at Stanford. So they should really be pushing this, because so much of the traffic is generated by Stanford. So, and then I just want to say, with all these projects, I'm just concerned about staff having the time to work on all of these things. So anyway, happy to see things moving forward for bikes, and extremely happy to see that Lindero Avenue is hopefully permanently off the table. Thank you.
1 second. Our next speaker is Sabrina L. Sabrina L., you may now speak.
Hi, thank you, everyone. I'm Sabrina Lynn. I live in the Midtown area, right near El Dorado. And I want to build on the earlier comments about the relationship between the grade separation projects with the bike lanes. So the comment is less to do with, well, could there be alternates on the grade separation design based on the bike plan, but more about the traffic in that Midtown area between Oregon Expressway and Meadow. Should we adopt the underpass plans, there may not be any lights between San Antonio all the way maybe to Churchill, which means that all those little streets, whether it's El Carmelo or Loma Verde, for those of us who live in that area, to turn left towards Mountain View from the houses on those streets would become very, very difficult, because the traffic will just be nonstop. So that's just one thing to consider in terms of the ability to be able to go north-south.
Our next speaker is Adrian B. Adrian B, you may now speak.
Hello, good afternoon again. I wanted to tag on to the prior speaker regarding the existing CalAV underpass. I think that this is great that you're making more connectivity. I have no problem with that at points that are distant from existing crossings. But the CalAV underpass is probably your most important bike ped underpass. It obviously connects to the Caltrain station and all of your very vibrant commercial restaurant, dining, business district on Cal Avenue, Farmers Market, etc. And with the chicanes and the too steep grade, and I have family members that use it all the time, and they're telling me about, I guess, very confrontational interactions in there, with people literally bumping into other people that they feel are breaking the rules and pulling out cell phones and confrontations and arguments and so forth. So I really want to urge the city maybe to include looking at redoing maybe a parallel tunnel or something, because it would be terrible to have that tunnel be down for any length of time. But some creative thinking on how to improve your existing CalAV bike ped underpass, because from a usage point of view and criticality to your city and businesses and so forth, and the train station, I think that one would rank higher than any of the other ones, the new ones being considered. And so thank you.
Our next speaker is Elizabeth A.
Good afternoon, everybody. First, I'm a little bit of a broken record on this, but any underpass, we really need to default to minimum vertical clearances and bridge depths, given that they will be used by children who need gentle slopes, and in every circumstance, we are dealing with a constrained environment. Every inch of extra descent means additional feet of structure. Right now, we have something like 12 feet and a pretty thick bridge depth versus 8 feet. When we start with these excessive requirements, we end up with these Frankenstein alternatives that normal people reject, not knowing that the loop-de-loops may not be required if at some point later we tighten things up. I strongly believe there should be at least one bike ped crossing that provides separation from both Alma and the tracks in South Palo Alto. There are no such crossings south of Cal Ave until Shoreline Boulevard, which is itself not particularly optimal. In this way, it ties to the decisions on the other grade separation projects, because if we choose the hybrid, that will not have a separation of Alma, and that would strongly suggest to me the need to choose something with full separation. I do want to just talk about the evaluation criteria and the mobility benefits. I was glad to see an effort to sort of quantify those. It would be really great, and I think helpful to people, if you could take from the data, what showed up is sort of like, 5 to 10 of these key origin destinations, and show how the different travel routes would change. I think that would help people understand that. I do want to throw in one quick concept. I know everybody's, the CalAV thing is definitely suboptimal. One thing that, if you just put a light at CalAV and you have people cross, you could go straight onto the platform, and it would also then provide access to the ADA compliant undercrossings of the train tracks that we did, 10 or 15 years ago.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Our next speaker is Cedric D.
Thanks for having this item. And I also support the option A. I think it's the best one. And I note that it's right near the recently expanded Woolware Park. And then the park that will be going into, what used to be the Fry's parking lot. So those two parks together and the hopefully renaturalized creek, I think it could be a great draw for people in South Palo Alto and have a safe way to go there. And I think it'd be great if it were to also cross Alma below grade, so people don't have to cross at grade Alma, which, as people go, 50 miles an hour pretty easy on that. So it's a pretty dangerous crossing. And I also like the fact, like you said, that it doesn't take away people's houses or cause that kind of issue. So I think that's all. Thanks. Thank you, and thanks for some good comments. Just actually following up on those, I had neglected to when I was talking about the slope, I had neglected to raise the issue of the vertical clearance, which also shortens the length of the underpass, and those two things combined may reduce this serpentine need. Second, just on the Cal Ave, we have had discussions for a number of years about the prospect of a signal at Cal Ave and whether that would, from a vehicular signal, and whether that would, the pedestrian part of that would also just give access to the train station versus the underpass, or whether we would have at that location, a separate underpass someday that retain the current one and a fraction of the cost just put one underpass for pedestrians and one for bikes. That remains to be determined. It's not before us today, but I just wanted to put that out there. And then the issue of collaboration with both Stanford and Stanford Research Park and our school district, who has recently, after a number of years of kind of not embracing our invitation to participate in this, has come to recognize that this really does impact their school transportation, even their school boundaries. I really look forward to their participation. And that Cal Ave or some other signal, maybe at the El Dorado location, adds another benefit, which is to calm the speeding traffic on Alma. It's a raceway from out in front of Grocery Outlet until no signal, until you get all the way down to Churchill. And there are a number of, that whole Oregon Expressway area is a pretty hazardous set of interchanges. So that would be another benefit to this. So let me ask colleagues, are we moving toward a recommendation to focus on A?
Yeah, that's what I was just struggling with, because we were given two options, option 1 and option 2, and I think we're at option 3, which is what if we not only recommend doing away with DEF, we also really recommend a focus on A. I don't know if that means you had originally said, Chair, that A, B, and C were kind of coming in. We seem to be concentrating in the vicinity of A, B, and C. You said, do we go under Alma or not? Do we deal with different slopes, and what are the trade-offs? And I just wonder if there's merit in saying, you know what, let's look at A, B, and C. Let's look at the various, variables that you articulated, and maybe some others, rather than just come out of here with a recommendation for A.
B and C could be mitigated because of slope and vertical clearance, but it doesn't look like they'd be able to avoid the serpentine. That's a big serpentine there. It's a short distance versus the ramp distance on the west side on A. Charlie, do you have any light that you can shed on whether there's any possibility that B or C could be reduced to a single property by having a non-serpentine ramp? It doesn't look like it to me, but I'm going by the seat of the pants on that.
Yeah, there's a few things I'll say, and I'll also tee up Jaggi from BKF on the line as well, who can speak to this. As part of our development of these 8 alternatives, we went through multiple different iterations, and at one point we even looked at what it would take to get down to just using one parcel. These parcels in this area are relatively smaller, and so there's limited space to work with. And when we fit some kind of a ramp in that tight space, what you have is tight 90-degree turns and narrower facilities. So you can do it, but there's trade-offs with that. I'll also say that, again, there's more information that we'll need before we would be able to run through those different alternatives to see if we change the slope by 1%, what does that ultimately mean? And that comes down to things like the soil that's in specific locations and what amount of space, like how deep do you actually need to go in order to do the certain, the actual construction. I'm speaking outside of my area of expertise at this point. So if Joggy's on the line and maybe wants to speak to this a bit more, I think that would be helpful for the committee.
Great.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. Just adding to what you had already mentioned, I think there are a couple different challenges. One from just, connecting from point A to point B and having the vertical rise within one parcel becomes very constrained. So there are those angular, 90-degree turns that are needed, but the real challenge kind of comes from a constructability perspective because when you start having walls that share the rise and run of the ramps on both sides, it gets very narrow and challenging to construct. So we, when we evaluated it, it's very tight. And I think generally we kind of deviated from just identifying one parcel because there would be challenges from a constructability perspective, and there would likely be the need of a second parcel to just facilitate construction of that meandering pathway.
Thank you. That's the way it looked to me. So that's why that kind of reaffirms for me why B and C are not good options.
And so A is the only option. Are you still looking at the San Antonio ones or no?
I would advocate that not at this time, and that we focus on trying to get the most important one done, and have the staff time and the financial resources not spread out if we really don't think these others are viable.
So I move that we recommend to council alternative A as the preferred alternative.
And I will second that. And I just want to make sure that there's nothing that we're missing. Does staff have any concerns with that recommendation?
So just to clarify, by recommending A, you're eliminating from further consideration all other alternatives.
Yes.
Okay.
And my question is, do you have any heartburn with that?
Nope.
Okay.
I will say in the staff report, it did say some of the community feedback you got was, wouldn't it be great if A included an option to tunnel completely under, right? So we should look at A1 and 2.
That's right. I would concur with that. Mayor Lowing, you have any thoughts on this motion?
No, if you can hear me, it's thumbs up.
Okay, we can hear you and see you. All right. Then let's take a vote. All in favor? Aye. Oh, well, actually, we need a roll call because he's remote.
Yeah. Councilmember Lithcott Hames,
Yes.
Chair Burt,
Yes.
Mayor Lowing.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0.
Okay, so we took longer
But
on
we
the
saved
first
some time, but we saved some time on this item going forward.
We moved forward. Yeah.
So to that point, this is a small version of that, but you are currently scheduled to hear this on the December 1st City Council meeting. It's currently scheduled on action. Once again, you have the option as a unanimous committee recommendation to agendize it on consent. Your preference?
I think it's a significant enough decision that we should have it as
And we have
action.
these two alternatives, A1 and 2.
Right.
Thank you.
So we're,
Yep. So good. That will allow another opportunity for community members, once they hear about this recommendation, to weigh in on it as it goes to the full council.
I'm sorry. So the A1 and 2 issue of going under or over Alma is
not
part
under,
of the, under or across.
Across,
Is-
yes.
That's also part of the motion. Was that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Are we good? Thank you. Okay. I think there's some people in South Palo Alto who may sleep more soundly tonight now. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Now we move on to another big item, review of refined alternative designs for recommendation to the council to advance selected grade separation alternatives to 15% design at Churchill, Meadow, and Charleston.
Chair Burt,
Yes.
before we start this one, I was just gonna ask, because maybe it's good to know in advance before we get to the very end of the meeting and are asking ourselves, if you're unable to finish this item today, what happens?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Sorry.
Well, we've said we have a hard stop at 5. It's close to 5:15, but yeah.
Yes, I really appreciate the question because I'll give you my perspective, which is that you are scheduled for the full council to hear this item as a special meeting on December 10th, correct? And then that will then be continued to a regular meeting on December 15th. So if the committee is not able to reach the point of a recommendation, quite frankly, you'll have the conversation with the full council anyway. So it might not be a problem at all.
So they could benefit from kind of our input, tentative direction, even if we haven't come to a clear recommendation.
Exactly.
What I want to add, though, is when we look at the calendar for next year, let's see if we can disaggregate rail and finance, because this is not the first meeting where rail has screeched to a halt to make room for finance. We passed something, said full council will debate it.
We could
and then
simply
we've got
start
the-
finance at 6.
And then full council didn't get the full time on it, on the item that, so this is not a great.
Yeah, okay, good point. All righty. So, Joe, are you starting this or Rippon?
Good afternoon again. So tonight we are bringing this item to discuss review of grade separation alternatives at Churchill Meadow in Charleston. And we do have staff from our project team, Edgar Torres and Jill Gibson, who will be supporting us in presenting the technical details of our of the grade separation alternatives refinements. Next slide, please. So our purpose generally is to share with you the recent community engagement efforts and the feedback we received from these community meetings. And we would like to have Rail Committee review these alternatives, refinements, and provide us recommendations to proceed with 15% design on selected alternatives. I'll skip a few next slides and we can go to the next slide, number 6. The previous slides have been discussed previously several times at the public meetings as well as at the Rail Committee meetings. So just in interest of time, I'd like to note that we are at the end of the alternative refinement phase, and we like to seek a decision as we move forward with the 15% design. As Ed noted earlier, we do have a council session scheduled on December 10th, and so that will be a full council discussion, and if we can have any input and direction on which alternatives to proceed with the 15% design, that will be much appreciated. I'll hand it over to Jill for sharing our community engagement efforts. Thanks.
Thanks, Rippon. Good afternoon, Rail Committee. It's good to be back with you guys. So I'm going to start with a community engagement recap since we were last here. So first, a little bit on our outreach. So used a lot of different channels, the city's social media. We worked through the Palo Alto Weekly. We sent just under 1,000 mailers out, blast to the neighborhood associations, and physical lawn signs. Next slide, please. So we did host 2 community meetings on the same day on 9:30, 4 to 6 for the first one, 6 to 8 for the second one. It was well attended. We had over 100 participants. Each meeting had its own presentation focused on Charleston Meadow, and then focused on Churchill and Seal. We had a presentation and then an interactive workshop portion, which the pictures show really ask community members to roll up their sleeves and interact with the alternatives themselves, ask questions with the technical project team, and then provide their comments and questions physically on the map. So a lot of really good community dialogue. That was really helpful for the project team as we think about refining and advancing through the next phases. And so I think overall really positive. Next slide, please. So I wanted to provide, just general high level feedback themes across all alternatives. In your packet in attachment E, we've cataloged all of the comments that we've received both online as well as in person. So over 300 comments. We've organized them into these categories. And then the top 3 really were questions and comments and concerns around
traffic, circulation, active transportation, and property impacts. And we're going to come back to throughout this presentation, we're going to come back to these themes. So today we're seeking Rail Committee's recommendations for City Council on which concepts to move forward. And this is really a summary of the alternatives before we advance into discussion. So again, just to remind all of us in a bit of a table setting is that we're looking for recommendations on which configuration to advance, right? Certainly throughout the design refinement process, we'll continue to collaborate with both the community and Rail Committee on the features and the elements. And ultimately, as we discussed at the last Rail Committee, we're really working towards setting an environmental footprint to study during the 35% in environmental phase. For your consideration today, really looking to narrow down, if possible, which concepts that we move into 15%. And just a note too, Chair Burton noted this earlier, but just that the funding environment for grade separations is quite challenging and continues to be challenging. And so Ripon noted that City Council has prioritized Meadow and Charleston over Churchill. And so potentially continuing discussions on the prioritization of which projects advance. Next slide. So for this presentation, wanted to just kind of describe the outline for both members of the public in person and online, as well as the committee, is how we're going to work through each concept. So first, Edgar's going to walk through the plan views, which we did do at the last Rail Committee meeting, then show a rendering, talk through the rendering, and then talk through potential property impacts, the construction considerations as we know them today. We're still very early in the process. I'll jump in and describe some of the community feedback on each concept or alternative, and then we'll close that particular alternative with a considerations summary. Next slide. So based on the City Council's past direction, along with the direction from the Rail Committee feedback and the engagement themes that we've heard from our most recent community engagement and past engagement, throughout this presentation, we're going to highlight the key kind of technical considerations around each alternative. So traffic and circulation, active transportation, potential property impacts, and construction considerations. So that's how we're organizing kind of how we work through each concept. Next slide. Did want to just touch on, it's stuck. Did want to touch on costs. So previously, the city did prepare preliminary construction cost estimates developed in 2020, and then most recently updated in 2024 that was shared with Rail Committee. And so wanted to have this as a reference, the left side as a reference for you all.
Some key considerations here is that these preliminary costs, these construction costs, have not been vetted or validated by the integrated project team. And one of the things that has been experienced recently with other projects, as they have gone to the industry to get market pricing or commercial pricing for those projects, they have come in substantially higher than previous estimates by project sponsors. And so as part of this integrated project team's commitment to the city and to the public is to be able to develop total delivery plus construction costs for the completion of the project that will be part of the 15% drawings. And so that will be, we are currently assembling that team of former contractors that have the experience of delivering mega projects. Next slide, please. And so we'll go quickly reviewing some of the key elements of Churchill Avenue. So on the screen is the partial underpass showing the landscape strip and the curb and sidewalk. As previously described, this is reducing Alma Street from 2 lanes northbound to 1 lane northbound on the upper portion, and then 1 lane northbound on that lower portion, still providing 2 lanes through and being able to reduce that footprint with regards to the surrounding neighborhood. On the next slide, you'll see the rendering of said partial underpass with the landscape strip. You'll see that green strip on the left-hand side. Again, that single lane both up above and down below. And so on the next slide, you will see this case, the partial underpass without that landscape strip. So instead of having that small parkway between the sidewalk and the roadway, that has been removed. The sidewalk is immediately adjacent to the roadway, as it can be in many locations. Next slide. And this is the rendering here now with that sidewalk being shown. I will note that there is a buffer there. Again, as we had previously shared, we have been working with city staff as well as the fire department to be able to ensure that the fire apparatus or apparati can respond through and to the neighborhood. So that is why you see the lane plus the buffer and then the sidewalk. Next slide. So with regards to the potential property acquisition, being mindful that if property is needed, that is a real estate transaction. And so in this case, there's the with landscape strip on the left-hand side showing 17 parcels, 29 dwelling units that may be affected by that adjustment. In this case, these are a narrow strip of property necessary to be able to provide that landscape strip. And then without the landscape strip, there would be 7 parcels or potentially 8 dwelling units that would be affected. And mostly this is to be able to provide the ADA ramps at the intersections, at the corners of the intersections. And so that is a distinction between the two concepts with and without the landscape strip. Next slide.
I'm sorry, can you shed a little light on how much property would be impacted approximately?
Approximately 2 to 2.5 feet with the landscape strip. And then for the ADA ramps, that can vary, but it's small portions, a few feet here and there. With regards to construction considerations, and this applies to both Churchill Avenue with and without the landscape strip. So the bike ped crossing would need to be built first in order to be able to maintain access to Pali. The method of construction is yet to be determined, but we're proceeding with the assumption that it is a form of box jacking with no shoe fly. There's still more work to be done with regards to utility relocation, including potential undergrounding of the electrical on the east side of Alma Street, being mindful that those poles are there and can affect the construction. Phasing for maintenance of traffic, the retaining walls and the bridge construction, or in this case, the box construction. And finally, being mindful that Alma Street may or likely would be reduced to 1 lane in each direction during construction. And because this site is being depressed, that means dirt is being removed and would need to be brought out or exported from the site. So that's truck traffic associated with that. Next slide.
And then in terms of community feedback, quickly to summarize, comments about, the desire to prioritize student access and safety. Folks like the idea of a physical buffer along Alma Street to calm traffic, and then a request across all alternatives to provide clarity of potential property impacts. And we do have in your packet detailed maps in the attachments to be responsive and be as clear as we can in terms of potential property impacts.
Next slide. Now we are transitioning to the bike ped crossing at Seal Avenue and Pierce Park. So there were 2 concepts that were presented to the public or to rail committee and then the public. One is along Seal Avenue, down the center of Seal Avenue, connecting to Stanford Avenue on the west side. This is provide a tunnel underneath Alma Street and the rail crossing before coming back up on a ramp up to grade for Park Boulevard. On the next slide, you'll see the aerial or isometric view of this showing the ramp going down the middle of Seal Avenue and then the ramp coming up on the east side of Pierce Park before proceeding to Park Boulevard. Next slide. This is a rendering view of the ramp going down the middle of Seal Avenue. Please note that there would be parking being removed. There is slight widening of the roadway to be able to still provide, again, access, both for fire access and vehicular access, and sidewalks on either side. Next slide. This is that connection at Park Boulevard. Next. Finally, the second option that was presented to the public and overall committee was the ramp along Alma Street. So in this case, the ramp proceeds parallel to Alma Street on the east side of Alma before going underneath Alma and underneath the railway crossing and connecting to Castilleja Avenue. This does provide a closer connection to Pali and also provides, again, less impact or less intrusive into the community, as this would be along Alma Street and would still require some property, but not nearly as impactful as Seal Avenue, both to parking and neighborhood access. Next slide. This is a rendering view of that ramp and tunnel from Seal Avenue and Alma Street to Castilleja. Next. And then a sort of ground plane view of that ramp at Seal Avenue. And then finally, the ground plane view of the ramp at Castilleja. And so, again, being able to provide ramps on either side. I will note that these ramps are at 8.1%. They require landings because they're greater than 5% grade. And so that is what's being provided here. We are very constrained physically as to where we can conform or match the existing elevations. And so that's what's being shown. Next slide. So in terms of potential property acquisition between these two options, Steel Avenue shows 15 parcels with 28 dwelling units. That could be potentially impacted, and it will remove on-street parking and some trees along that stretch of Seal Avenue. For the Alma Street ramp, there would be 4 parcels affected, 15 dwelling units, and this would again provide that closer connection to Pali along Castilleja. Next slide. In terms of construction considerations, and again, with any undercrossing and any work, subsurface work, the utility relocations are a major component of that effort. And one thing also to notice that construction would likely take place from Pierce Park towards Seal Avenue in order to be able to push the box from one side to the other. That's to be able to at least preserve as much as possible operations along Alma Street. Either option will likely require some form of a sewer pump station in order to be able to essentially pump that sewage up to be able to clear the tunnel and then come back down. The difference between these two in terms of construction, Seal Avenue ramp would require disruption to home access and local access only. There would be substantial utility relocations because now those utilities would need to be parallel to the ramp on both sides to be able to provide that service to homes. And it would likely further disrupt and make changes to the dog park and removal of large trees at Pierce Park. With regards to the Alma Street ramp, there would be potential lane closures on Alma Street, potentially even going one lane in each direction to be able to provide that construction space for both the box and the tunnel construction. And then and disruption to be able to provide, again, the relocation of utilities when that box is in order to provide the space for the box. Next slide.
And in terms of community feedback, Seal Avenue option, concerns for loss of on-street parking, comments on driveway conflicts, and concerns about tree removal versus Alma Street. I think a note that's more direct route to Pali, fewer impacts from a parking and property standpoint. And then I think in general, regarding both options, I think a lot of desire to understand more on the user-specific context, a desire to, and an interest in design treatments, landscape, and then I think comments and discussion around making sure that the students actually use the tunnel and not Churchill, given some folks' experience with California and Embarcadero facilities.
Next slide.
And then we'll leave this and come back to the end. We've got a summary of all of the concepts at the end.
Let's proceed to Meadow and Charleston Road. Excellent. So just a brief reminder here. In the past, what's been presented is both crossings being underpass, both crossings being hybrid. As part of our work with part of the delivery team has been exploring the option of having essentially bifurcating or separating the two options in such a way where Charleston or Meadow could be hybrid and the other could be an underpass. And we have validated that work, and we can state that one could be hybrid and one could be underpass. And so wanted to at least remind the rail committee of that option.
I just want to note your cost slide did not presuppose that.
That's correct, because the prior effort did not envision both being or being different types of separations. And so as part of our work, if that is something that is advanced, we would be able to price that for the committee. With regards to the hybrid at Meadow Drive, just a brief reminder, the tracks would be raised 17 to 19 feet, the road 4 to 6 lowered. There would be now dedicated left turn lanes along Meadow Drive and Alma Street. There would be the ability to be able to provide enhanced bicycle facilities, whether that's queuing space, dedicated bike lanes, protected bike facilities, and the potential for bike signals at the intersection. As part of this effort, we do have, as requested by Councilmember Lithgow-Hames, we did explore wider bridges and wider more open space. We are disclosing that that could lead to partial acquisition of a property as it gets wider, but we wanted to at least be mindful that that change from no impact to properties to potentially one property. But that's all, those are design options that can be explored as part of subsequent efforts. And it wanted to at least come back to the rail committee, at least for illustrative purposes, that there are design options that as the hybrid, if the hybrid were to be advanced, you can look at a center column option that's more open to the sides, side column options where the vehicular traffic is separated from the bicycle and pedestrians, which is that middle option. And then we'll call it the extra wide side columns where you open it up further to create more light or more space underneath for bikes and peds. So those are three very basic options to at least show that those options can be made available as the concept advances. Next slide. With regards to the Meadow Underpass, wanted to at least remind the committee that we did make adjustments to the multi-use path and the corresponding shoulder to narrow certain items up. We did confirm the ability to make certain turns for certain types of vehicles, or at least passenger vehicles. That's U-turns as necessary. And then there are, for at least the underpass, the potential for full and partial property acquisitions. On the next slide, you will see a rendering of this concept. This has been shared both at rail committee and in public meetings. Next slide. And then for the potential property acquisition, as an update, the hybrid, if there were to be a wider bridge, or depending on the width of that bridge, there may be the need for a partial, in this case, almost like 30 square feet of that backyard. But for the underpass, there's at least 2 full acquisitions that would affect 12 dwelling units and 5 partial acquisitions. Next slide. For construction considerations, in both alternatives, there will be temporary or full closure of Meadow Drive during construction, both the crossing and potentially a segment of the road, to be able to provide that space for construction to take place. The temporary lane closures on Alma Street would likely be needed, and could be for a prolonged period of time, depending on the construction method and how the box is constructed and pushed through, if it's underpass or if there's a shoe fly needed for the hybrid. The utility relocations and temporary disruptions of utility service is a key factor in both alternatives, and that does include a major sewer line relocation. In the case of the hybrid, a shoe fly is anticipated because the tracks are being elevated. So anytime you need to move the tracks up, a shoe fly is going to be necessary. Potential for phased approach to mitigate traffic impacts to Alma Street that would need to be further explored as part of 15% design. There are fewer utility relocations and interruptions as part of the hybrid because the roadway is only being depressed a few feet, 4 to 6 feet, versus a full depression as in the underpass. There is soil import into and out of the site. For the hybrid, because the tracks are going up, there needs to be soil brought in that needs to be retained by the retaining walls. In the underpass, yes, we're assuming currently box jacking with no shoe fly. There may be the option of a shoe fly depending on how the separations would be advanced. There would be temporary closure of Park Boulevard at Meadow, and Alma Street may be, if not likely, reduced to 1 lane in each direction. And that's on the best case scenario because there are bridges at Alma Street for the underpass that would need to be constructed. More utility relocations and interruptions are expected as part of the underpass, including a sewer pump station to be able to, again, accommodate the sewer line that's there that would need to go through the bridge. The phased work for retaining walls and bridges are a factor that would need to be considered. There's long retaining wall systems that need to be accommodated, and then substantive soil export from the site. Next slide.
And from a community feedback perspective, for both options, the strong desire to minimize property acquisitions, concerns over construction period impacts, noise, closures, disruptions, and a desire to avoid graffiti-prone concrete, and a lot of interest in landscaping. In terms of each alternative for hybrid, I think folks noted that it seems more comfortable from a walking and biking perspective, and an interest in considering this mixed wall column treatments. And from an underpass perspective, I think concerns about the grade, ramps, the length of the ramps, and tight turning movements for wheels, both bikes and wheelchairs. And I think some folks noted perception and indirect travel for southbound trips from the intersection. And we'll leave this next slide as a reference. We'll come back to at the end in terms of a summary of the considerations.
We'll proceed with Charleston Road. Next slide. Similar to Meadow Drive in the hybrid, tracks are elevated, road is depressed. In this case, similar to Meadow, wanted to disclose that if a wider bridge is being considered, there may be the potential of 2 partial acquisitions in the corners of the back lots, but wanted to again disclose that may be a factor. Next slide. Similar to Meadow, wanted to at least highlight the three options. There's one of the images. Unfortunately, we'll have that updated. There's the center column, the side columns, and then the side columns extra wide to be able to provide, again, more space for pedestrians and cyclists underneath. Next slide. With regards to Charleston Road underpass, there were 2 options. One that was previously developed, which we were able to show a roundabout going instead of 2 lanes to 1 lane. This is to be able to emphasize this, again, this slow and go philosophy where you're able to make that right turn from Alma Street and then be able to still maintain slower speeds and moving around the roundabout before proceeding underneath the crossing. We did explore reducing the width of the multi-use path while still providing comfortable space for active transportation users, and this concept does have both full and partial potential for full and partial property acquisitions. Next slide. This is the rendering of that roundabout as previously presented both to Rail Committee and the public. Next. And then the new concept that was previously presented to Rail Committee was this direct access ramp where we looked at the option of combining the access to and from Charleston Road to the south side of Charleston going towards the south, where there is anticipated more development on the south side of that, and be able to provide more direct access to Charleston Road from the south. This eliminated the roundabout and eliminated the associated property acquisitions associated with that, reduced the width of the multi-use path and the corresponding shoulders, and while we're able to reduce the amount of potential property acquisition, there still is partial and full property acquisition for this alternative. Next slide. The rendering here showing that ramp coming down from the bottom right side of the page going down towards Charleston and that underpass. And this is, again, you can see the rail bridge and there is an Alma Street bridge. And that's an important thing to note, that both bridges would have to be constructed in order for this underpass or any underpass to be successful. Next slide. So in terms of the potential property acquisition between the three options at Charleston Road. For hybrid, again, due to providing that option of a wider bridge, there is the potential of up to two partial corner acquisitions. For the underpass roundabout, there were 3 full acquisitions and dwellings, and then 26 partial potential partial acquisitions. That was reduced as part of the, pardon me, that was reduced as, I was trying to just minimize this. There we go. To 1 full parcel acquisition and potentially up to 23 partial parcel acquisitions. Next slide. For construction considerations, very similar to Meadow Drive, temporary and full closure of Charleston Road crossing during construction, as well as segments of Charleston Road itself. Temporary lane closures of Alma Street, those durations may depend on the construction method, as previously mentioned. And then there are substantive utility relocations and temporary disruptions and major utility relocations, including the need for protecting some major regional utility assets along Charleston Road. For hybrid, a shoe fly is anticipated. However, there would be less utility relocations and interruptions and both soil import and export. In terms of the underpass, again, assuming box jacking and no shoe fly, that could change depending on, again, what combination of options are considered. And then that would require temporary closure of local roads, potentially of Alma Street down to 1 lane in each direction. The roundabout has more disruption to Charleston Road in order to be able to construct that roundabout. The direct access ramp would have more disruption to Alma Street to be able to construct that ramp down. Underpass inevitably would have more utility relocations and interruptions and a sewer pump station, again, to be able to accommodate that sewer line, including phased work for retaining walls. And because, again, it's depressed, deeper, and much larger in footprint, more soil export or more trucks to be able to export the trucks, soil out. Next slide.
So from a community perspective, I think folks noted for hybrid, as Edgar noted, less property impacts. I think a note on the maintaining the neighborhood access and minimal traffic detours. A lot of comments on ideas or suggestions for retaining wall enhancements and treatments. I think folks noted as well better for pedestrians and cyclists with more safer or what's indirect crossings. And from an underpass perspective, definitely comments and concerns over the construction impacts. Roundabout specifically, property impact concerns, perception on safety challenges. Folks noted the indirect travel and definitely the sentiment less favored versus the hybrid and the direct access ramp. For the direct access ramp, mixed views on the roadway ped bike design. Folks noted the fewer property impacts and folks liking the better perceived traffic operations. And then we'll, I think, come right back to this, Ripon, I think over to you.
So considering, so tonight actually we are seeking Rail Committee's direction on which alternatives to proceed forward with, and considering we have very limited time, we can, next slide please. We can show all these alternatives that we have in consideration, and for viewing purposes, we have the slides, which also summarizes all the impacts in the next few slides. And then finally, we have a motion on the last slide that determines, that lists all the different alternatives that we have in consideration, if there's any feedback on which ones to move forward. Also like to note that we do have that the costs are increasing significantly, considering what we have experienced from or learned from other communities that are proceeding with these projects. So further prioritization and narrowing might also be, sought out from the council and rail committee. Thanks.
Thank you. If I might just share a couple things. One, following up on that last comment by Rippon, we've seen at the Broadway Burlingame and Rengstorff drastic increases in costs in just the last 3 years on the estimates. On Broadway Burlingame, virtually a doubling. At Rengstorff, an additional 50%. And basically what that is indicating is that the funding, and state and federal funding availability looks less promising than it did a year ago. As a result, we may be facing something that we haven't discussed until now, which is we had prioritized Meadow and Charleston and said we may mothball the Churchill for the indefinite future. But we may be looking at Charleston or Meadow rather than Charleston and Meadow. And that's kind of a new discussion and consideration for us to begin to digest. The other thing that has changed that helps us in a way is up until COVID, we were looking at a significant increase in the number of trains and the number of cars from commuting. Both of those now are projected to be significantly lower than we were looking at, and the regional growth forecasts through 2060 have been revised downward very significantly. We will still have changes, our new housing element and whatever amount of housing actually gets built will be significant, but these are real changes that have kind of reframed the context for this. A couple other things. When we, as a council, decided to go forward with the additional engineering on the alternatives that we've looked at so far, a lot of it was that we wanted to see what that additional engineering could do to reduce the potential impacts, particularly on property acquisitions. We're not at the 15%. What we've had brought forward so far has already had very significant reductions at both at Churchill Seal and at Charleston Meadow. And we have a hope that as we go to 15%, we could have some additional reductions in those impacts, but we don't know it until we've authorized that to go ahead. One thing that I didn't see in a slide, I don't know if we have it quantitatively, but all along, one of the primary reasons to consider the underpass at Meadow and Charleston was it was the only alternative that significantly reduced the traffic impact, significantly increased the capacity at the intersections. Edgar?
Yeah, and we do have that as supplemental slide.
Yeah, be good to pull that up.
63.
Without that, we kind of why would we be looking at the underpass?
Right. Pull it up here.
Okay. And then we had those preliminary numbers with a big gap between the underpass and the hybrid. There's a lot of skepticism of whether that gap should be so large, but until we do what Edgar had described of bringing in the cost estimators, which, as he described, is using contractors or expertise and not just designers to estimate that. I can tell you from the BART tunnel, this is a right way to go, is to bring in the contractor expertise and not just designers who really just don't have as deep of understanding of costs. Okay, so this is something that we really want to be understanding. And if Helmet Meadow. I'm just
Yes.
looking at this.
So on the screen, you'll see the preliminary analysis for traffic operations in the AM and PM peak hours at Meadow Drive. And so in the existing conditions, effectively, it's 42 seconds of average delay. It's unique in each approach. Some of them are much longer than others, as has been experienced by the driving public. For the hybrid, that average delay gets reduced to about 40 seconds. So think about it being able to move same amount of traffic, less average delay. And in fact, in this case, the distribution of the extremes gets reduced. And so it's a more typical experience for all drivers. And that's because, you remove the uncertainty associated with the rail crossings, the train passing by. The underpass does provide a better operational experience. In other words, in terms of delay, or how the average delay that a typical user experience at the intersection. But it does come with the caveat that now there are less movements available to the public with the underpasses because of how the underpasses are configured.
So before we have other questions here from the public, can we have slide 10 come back? And just to potentially accelerate whether we can make recommendations today. From what we've heard, I would be interested in hearing from colleagues on whether, just lost it. There we go. Whether at Churchill, we would be willing to eliminate further consideration of the seal ramp and eliminate consideration of the landscape strip. And at Charleston, whether we would want to focus on the direct access version of the underpass and not continue evaluation of the roundabout. To me, those are the things that we might be able to make recommendations on today.
I am with you, Chair Burt. I do want to note, I just made eye contact with the clerk. There are 9 people wanting to speak in public comment. I have some other thoughts to share, but just given where we are, I like that direction. I think we should go to public comment and get that in before the meeting ends.
And apologies to the public. We're going to ask you to truncate it to 1 minute each. I'm sorry, but we got a drop dead time. So let's.
I agree with your idea.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Ed. I should have asked. Yep. Oh, and we could hear you well. All right, let's do the members of the public.
All right, our first speaker is John M. After John M, it'll be Elizabeth A.
Well, thank you, everybody here, for your leadership and hard work. There's been a tremendous amount of work. It's a high-level discussion. I'm sorry that we got 1 minute to discuss the most consequential building project in the history of Palo Alto. I sent a letter on the 16th of November. I don't know we have time to get into that. I'd like to ask that be entered for the record. You sent it by email. I'll give it to Sam here. But my comment really is, this is of enormous consequence for us. One thing that I ask for is more human factors analysis to be included in further discussion and publicized for the public. There's discussion, for example, of property acquisition. That's quite a benign statement, apart from 20-foot concrete walls going up and 5 years of construction noise. What does that really mean for us? What does that mean for our property values? If our property values with these projects diminish, and based on the research as a
Thank you. That concludes your time.
We'll lose $70 to $100 million in net worth in our homes because of this project.
Our next speaker is Elizabeth A, followed by Eric N.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned that the underpasses are not getting a fair shake here. I mean, I think the construction costs, we have seen what electrification has done if you need a shoe fly track. I remember the construction in San Bruno and the constant complaints of the neighbor because the project extends all the way down, the entire, and that's probably 5 years. And that is hammered. I mean, that is really and you're left with this tall wall, you're also never going to be able to, on the bike things, I think people are not appreciating the benefits of having a bike bridge over Park Boulevard. They're not appreciating that there's the possibility of traffic calming between Alma and El Camino. We have a lot of things about perceived this and perceived that. But we have not done that same analysis that we just did for where we should put a bike undercrossing, about the travel times and the changes and how people would
That
change the way they
concludes your
get
time.
around. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Eric N. Yep.
Slide 2. Good afternoon. My name's Eric Nordman. Next slide. So on the seal tunnel construction, I was kind of confused about whether you could actually do a jackbox construction with a wedge shaped. I think that's not necessarily required. You could have a flat section under the jackbox section and the slope at Alma. Next slide. Well, although I prefer the other option, the seal tunnel, if you provided the road, use the utility road, you could save part of the parked land. Next slide. In the situation, you've got turning cars to the left of the bicycles. The Dutch intersection is designed to deal with that, and so that might be something that should be considered. Next slide.
Thank you. That concludes your time.
Wow.
Sorry about that. Yep. Our next speaker is Melinda M.
Thank you. With the costs in mind of the 79 level crossings on the Caltrain corridor, are any of them going forward with grade separation? I would encourage us to pull the plug on this project. I think it's a boondoggle, and we should focus everything on making biking optimal. We have a flat city. There is no reason that we can't be like many European cities that have people biking. Let's make it miserable for the drivers. And this commuter rail is driving a lot of energy and projects and potential costs for something that hopefully will never happen in my lifetime. So I'm pretty negative on this hybrid underpass, whatever. Seal Avenue, definitely no. Anyway, thank you.
Our next speaker is Rachel C. Rachel C., you may now speak.
Hello, thank you. I wanted to comment on the Churchill options. I realize it's not moving forward right away, but I would like to urge you to please prioritize trees. In this project, it's just a massive amount of concrete, and it pretty much eliminates all the trees along Caltrain, between Caltrain and Alma, and also along Alma on the other side. So while I realize you're trying to remove property impacts, I think this deserves a lot more conversation with property owners on Alma on whether they would rather have a little bit less property and still have a row of trees along Alma. For sure, in our neighborhood in Southgate, we would prefer more trees in all the places. So please do not eliminate the landscape strip at this time. I would also just urge you to not spend any more time or money on Churchill at this time, and do not make any further decisions moving on to more consultants to spend more money if this is the last priority. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ken J.
I want to thank the consultants for a great presentation. The one thing I didn't hear was whether Meadow and Charleston would be constructed at the same time. To me, that's a big deal. Maybe I just haven't been paying attention. I tend to cross at Charleston frequently, and the underpass design would serve me well, but I have great concerns about forcing all of the bike and ped traffic to be on one side of the street, because I don't know how people are going to get back to the other side. So to me, that's a huge concern. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Patrice B. Patrice B., you may now speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm requesting that the council and the Rail Committee take a second look at the direct access ramp, particularly as the direct access ramp, as was presented, did not include a U-turn from Charleston to Mumford. There are 2 turns you're not able to make using the direct access ramp. The U-turn at Charleston to Mumford was put in place for this, but it was put in place for passenger vehicles only, which is correct because the streets are residential and restricted. My question is, what happens to bus and truck traffic? Planning has already said they would have to get some sort of variance. The road would have to be widened. This would require more property acquisitions. We're sitting here saying the direct access ramp would reduce it to 23 partial acquisitions. There are 8 families on Mumford and Eli that would be impacted if you had to widen our road to allow trucks and buses. Please consider that it would be 30 partial takes if in fact you allowed the restricted trucks and buses onto our streets where they don't belong. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sabrina L. Sabrina L., you may now speak.
Hi, thank you very much. I just have one comment. Please be reminded that half of the high school population probably live on the east side of Alma, so east-west crossing from South Palo Alto to Gunn High School and back is really important. I do support the earlier comments that having 2 bike lanes on the same side of the road creates a significant user issue with students, and I am concerned that what they will end up doing is taking the vehicle roads, which can ultimately be much more dangerous. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Roland. Roland, you may now speak.
Thank you. I was extremely impressed by the earlier presentation by BKF engineers. This is the first time you had real engineers addressing you as to what's feasible and what is not. But to make sure I don't run out of time, I'm going to read to you a question to us, Gemini. Do BKF engineers have any expertise designing modular viaducts or overpasses with a gantry train in confined environments? When you do, you'll be impressed. The solution is very simple. It's between both Meadow and Charleston, between the Caltrain tracks and Alma. No impacts outside the right of way. No shoe-flies. Only impact on Caltrain operation is intermittent signal tracking to the construction zone. And last but not least, it makes it possible to erect passing tracks in the exact same area at a later date. Thank you.
Our final speaker is David N. David N., you may now speak. David N., are you there?
Thank you. So back to colleagues. Mayor Lowing, did you want to weigh in with questions or comments?
No, I would have suggested the exact same thing that you did. And of course, if you just look at the scorecard, at this point, the hybrid for Meadow and Charleston is looking superior to the underpass before you get the costs. And then when you get the costs, although they're all going up, the hybrid is roughly about half the cost. So those are my comments.
Okay. Julie?
Thank you, Chair. It's terrible that we're like going so quickly, but I appreciate it and will agree with everything the Chair just suggested and what the Mayor just said. We were told when we were looking at hybrid way back when that the rise on which the train would travel could be an earthen wall or it could be some kind of column structure. And I don't think we've seen any rendering of the non-earthen wall. I know we have in the opening, there are columns that hold the bridge up, but we were told that there could be a short, I don't know if I'm using the right term, Pat, what's the term for that?
Columns.
Right, what? Abutments. And that was important to us, I think, particularly coming out of the viaduct option and the compromise about visuals. So I would love to see some kind of drawing that approximates that, unless it's more money. I think we ought to be looking at
it's more money. It's a lot more money.
Yeah, so as you lengthen
Okay.
that stretch of bridge, think of it as
Okay.
bridge lengthening.
Got you.
Yes.
Okay.
We're replacing dirt with bridge
I
structure.
appreciate that. Okay. The concerns about the wall and the graffiti, I think this is a great place for public art in the form of murals. Whenever you have a big road, a highway, or a train cutting through a community, there's a concern about segregation and divisiveness. And we've heard this concern from people on the west side of Alma. If we go into this knowing this is a place for mural art, if we keep that structure underneath the bridge as wide as possible, we're going to create light, we're going to create visibility. And I just want to be sure that we're thinking about that even in this early stage. Obviously, we don't want graffiti. We want this to feel like there's a beautiful thing coming through our city. I do want to say that just when we get to the next step, which is this coming to council on the 10th, the slides need to be cleaned up further. I appreciate the effort made to bring kind of an equity to all the options. Last time I was like, where's the rendering on this? Okay. I still noted you started at the Meadow section with the photo of Charleston, not Meadow. There was no aerial view of the current Meadow Street with the legend inset in it like there was for Charleston. There was no rendering of the Meadow hybrid. There's nothing that's showing us what that U-turn at Alma Crossing is going to look like. So I just want to be sure that when this gets to council, the visuals match the arguments and support the arguments. There were also some slides that didn't show you had houses in blue, but there was nothing in the legend that said a blue bar equals a partial or full taking. So just when you go to the next level, please comb through the slides and just make sure they are really top notch. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And I just want to frame a couple of the considerations of looking at hybrid versus underpass. One that was mentioned is that the hybrid actually has signal control for bikes and peds versus the underpass does not. So it's free flowing. Second, the really important traffic capacity is nominally improved with the hybrid, very significantly improved with the underpass. And then one thing that was touched on is the construction impacts, and we'll probably learn more as we go forward on this, what can be mitigated, but potentially there are significantly more construction impacts with a hybrid than the underpass. Is that, or the other way around?
No, it'd be the other way around.
Okay.
It'd be the other way around in terms of utilities in particular. For the underpass, there would be substantially more.
I meant shoe fly and
for the hybrid, it would require shoe fly and it would be a longer distance in terms of the potential impact. It's not as localized as it is for the underpass.
So let me ask, and Nadia?
I was just going to reiterate what you're saying. I think for going to council, I think it's really important that that traffic slide that was in your backups moves to the front, because at the end of the day, we're spending the largest infrastructure project we might be building in modern history. And presumably it's to leave the community in a better stay. And if you don't understand that the underpass has such a difference between the hybrid, it doesn't all look the same when we're talking about the whole transportation benefit to the network. And so I would just want to push that forward as we talk about that the next time.
And that consideration has been generally ranked from councils going back years, the number one consideration, but we kind of buried the lead. Okay. So let me ask, go back to this question with just a couple minutes that we could decide on this. On first, do we want to advance Churchill to the 15% engineering so that when we park that, mothball it, it will have a better understanding of what we've been able to mitigate and what we cannot? And if we do we want to eliminate the seal ramp at this point in time and the landscape strip for purposes of going forward on that?
I certainly feel good about eliminating the seal ramp, the landscape strip versus some kind of protective barrier on the sidewalk. I'm not clear enough on what we get out of that. So I don't want to remove the landscape strip.
Ed?
Yeah, I would basically agree with you. I don't see a lot of difference in the diagrams with or without the landscape strip, and it does help some minimal reduction of minimal takings.
So are you favoring?
I agree.
I'm sorry,
I'm agreeing with what you said.
to drop the landscape strip.
We could drop it at this point because I don't think it makes a big difference.
Okay. And then on Charleston, do we want to only have Edgar go forward with a direct access ramp and no longer the roundabout?
I'd agree with that as well.
Really? Oh, no.
Well, just to the point that Nadia was making about the slide that was in the backup that needs to be brought into the main slide, and this whole, like, this is why we started this, you know, it sounds like there are I'm not, you know, if I had to vote today, I'd vote for hybrid based on what I know and what I think and what I care about. But what I'm hearing is that Charleston underpass was not represented in the fullness of the benefits it offers. So I'm a little nervous about, and I think our council wants some stuff to.
Well, there's two questions. One, do we proceed on underpass? And with the direct access, we do.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, I see.
B on the underpass. And then separately, do we proceed on further evaluation of both the roundabout and the direct access?
Got you.
Or just one?
Yeah, I've never been a fan of the roundabout. I am, if you're suggesting that we reduce it down to underpass direct route, I am definitely in favor of that.
And alternatively, we could let the full council make,
Yeah.
not make it, they're going to make the decision, but we could not necessarily make a recommendation at this time on that.
Yeah.
But I think you just got 2 votes to go with it anyway. So
To go with, is to be clear on that, to go
to
with,
to eliminate the roundabout.
I see.
I do think we had an important question come in from a member of the public about the widening. Does the direct access route contemplate that buses and trucks would be on it? If so, will they have to widen? If so, will there be property acquisition? So let's make sure that that comes forward in the analysis.
Yeah, so any buses or trucks can still operate on Alma Street. Charleston, if they were to go north-south or east-west on it, we would not anticipate truck traffic or bus traffic to go into the neighborhoods. They would stay on the primary arterials and then circulate around if necessary. So this is common where certain vehicles are restricted in certain locations. And in this case, the U-turn would allow for passenger vehicles, but not for those larger trucks or buses. They have other means to be able to travel along primary arterials where they do already today.
So I'm struggling with whether to make a recommendation to council on dropping the underpass, dropping the roundabout, or allow them to wrestle with this without our recommendation.
If I could just say, you're going to have a study session and you're going to have another council meeting. And this is the first time that the general public is is able to give direct comment on the difference of the two. And they had 1 minute.
Yeah, even though I'm leaning one way, I'd be game to.
Let me correct. There's not going to be a separate study session. We are trying to have one action item on December 10th, but it could continue on.
So the first one may be conducted similar to a study session, less formally, but it would be one action item over 2 meetings.
That's correct.
Clarify. Thank you. So then I would recommend that we only move that the only recommendation that we take at this time is to drop the Seal Avenue ramp. And allow the council to noodle the others. Yeah. Okay. Mayor Lowing, any comments on the motion?
No, I can go with it.
Okay. All right. Can you poll us?
Yeah. Mayor Lowing,
Yes.
Chair Burt,
Yes.
Councilmember Litkow-Hames.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0.
Okay. And just the reminder again, the next meetings at the council are
Is December 10th, and this is a special meeting exclusively to talk all night about great separations and an opportunity for community input there. And that will then be continued to December 15th for council action.
and the South Palo Alto Bikeway is December 1st.
December 1st.
Great.
What time is the meeting on the 10th?
On the 10th, I believe it's at 5:30. It'll start at the regular time.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Our meeting's adjourned.